"Get him out of my lobby, he doesn't belong here." The words cracked through the marble atrium like a gavel slamming wood. Laughter followed not from the crowd, not from the officers gripping his arms, but from the woman behind the reception desk. Her voice ricocheted against chandeliers and polished columns, filling every corner of the Grand Hotel with judgment disguised as policy. Two uniformed officers stood firm, one on each side of the man in the leather jacket. His wrists weren't cuffed, but the grip was close enough. Guests turned their heads. Phones rose like tiny spotlights. Some mouths curled into smirks, others into disbelief. But the woman in the blue suit, arms crossed, jaw tight, eyes sparkling with triumph, she reveled in it. To her, this wasn't just removal, this was performance, and he's silent. Steady was cast as the intruder. The irony? He owned the building. From the mezzanine, a chandelier's light cascaded across his face, sharpening the contrast. Her glee, his calm. She tilted her chin high, savoring the spectacle. He lowered his gaze only slightly, as if to measure the marble beneath his shoes. No panic, no resistance, just stillness, anchored. A man near the elevator whispered, "Is this really happening?" His companion nudged him to hush, eyes already fixed on the two officers steering the accused toward the exit. In the corner, a junior clerk raised her phone, hesitant fingers trembling against the record button. The red light blinked once before she caught his eye. He shook his head, slow, deliberate. No words, but the message was clear. Not yet. The woman in blue sneered louder, her words now for the crowd. People like him think they can walk into five-star spaces, flash a smile, and steal access they didn't earn. Murmurs rippled, some nodding, some shifting uneasily. The chandeliers hummed above like an orchestra holding one long, tense note. But look closer. His posture never sagged. His breathing never faltered. Even as the officers tugged at his arms, even as the humiliation swelled, he stood balanced, like someone who had carried this weight before and learned not to stumble. Because this wasn't his first removal, and it wouldn't be his last test. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now, back to the man in the leather jacket. At that moment, one guest let out a quiet gasp. Another muttered, "Check his ID at least." But the woman behind the desk waved them off with a flourish, like a queen dismissing her court. "He's not a client," she snapped. "He's a con." The lobby no longer felt like luxury. It felt like a courtroom. The crowd was the jury, the manager, the prosecutor, and the man at the center silent, black, restrained, was already sentenced in their eyes. But he didn't blink. He didn't plead. He didn't raise his voice. He simply let the silence build, as if daring the room to choke on it. And in that silence, something shifted. Because power, real power, doesn't need to announce itself. It waits, it watches, and it knows the exact second to strike. Hours earlier, he had walked into the hotel alone. No entourage, no security detail, just a leather jacket, dark jeans, and a plain white shirt. He didn't look like a billionaire. He didn't want to. That was the point. His name? Not yet. The lobby didn't deserve it. To them, he was just another guest, one they decided didn't belong. But here's what they didn't know. This wasn't a random visit. It was a test. 2 weeks ago, he'd received a report anonymous, short, almost desperate, from a junior employee at this very property. It described a pattern at the front desk. Guests turned away, always the same profile. Young, black, dressed down, traveling alone. Each time the explanation was policy. Each time the guests disappeared, humiliated, unheard. He'd seen this story before. At 23, standing in line at a boutique hotel in Atlanta, card in hand, confirmed reservation on the system, only to hear the clerk say, "You don't look like someone who stays here." He spent that night in his car, engine humming, shame biting into his skin. That memory never left him. It built him. So now, decades later, he walked into his own empire with no announcement. A quiet billionaire disguised as a regular man. He wanted to see if the reports were true. He wanted to see if the culture at his flagship hotel had rotted without him noticing. The chandeliers had glowed when he entered, bouncing light across the marble lobby. The clerks barely glanced up. One of them, a young woman with a polished bun and sharp navy suit, didn't smile, didn't greet, only asked, "Checking in?" Her tone carried the weight of suspicion, not service. "Yes," he replied. "Reservation under Carter. Penthouse." She blinked, lips tightening. Then, without checking, she tapped her colleague. Whispers, side glances, a smirk. He had seen it all before. Minutes later, the manager appeared, the same woman, now laughing as officers dragged him. Back then, she had leaned across the desk, nails clicking against marble. "This is a premium property," she said. "Are you sure you have the right hotel?" He didn't argue. He slid his ID across the counter. A black card followed, matte, weighty, embossed with his name. She picked it up with 2 fingers as if it might stain her. "Strange," she muttered. "This looks suspicious." He had answered calmly, "Run it." She didn't. Instead, she pressed a button under the desk. Within moments, 2 officers walked in. That's how we got here, how a man with the deed to every chandelier, every polished column, every inch of marble floor was being marched out like a trespasser. And yet, through it all, he didn't resist. He didn't shout. Because the real test wasn't whether they would try to erase him. It was whether he could stand still long enough for the truth to reveal itself. Behind the calm, his phone vibrated once. A text from his assistant miles away. "Protocol ready. Waiting for your signal." He didn't answer. Not yet. Because before he pressed send, he wanted the lobby to make one last mistake. The lobby was a theater now, and the script was tightening around him. One officer's grip shifted higher on his arm, fingers digging just enough to leave a mark. The other muttered under his breath, "We can walk you out easy or hard. Your choice." Their voices weren't cruel. Not yet. Just procedural. But the weight of suspicion wrapped around him like iron. The manager, however, wasn't satisfied with procedure. She wanted spectacle. She stepped from behind the desk, heels striking marble with a rhythm of authority. Her smile widened, sharp and deliberate, as she circled him like a prosecutor circling a witness. "Guests like you," she announced, her words pitched for the onlookers, "always think a fancy card or a fake name will get them through, but we're not fools." The crowd shifted. A businessman in a navy suit furrowed his brow. A mother with a stroller pulled her child closer. Someone near the elevators whispered, "Fake? Did she say fake?" He stayed silent, calm. The junior clerk, the one who had hesitated with her phone, finally spoke, her voice small but audible. I think his name was in the system this morning." The manager turned, eyes slicing through her like glass. "Stay out of this. Do you want your job?" The girl froze, cheeks burning, phone trembling in her hand. She lowered it, but her eyes stayed locked on him. Something in his stillness gave her courage she didn't yet know how to use. Then came the smirk. Another employee, young man at the desk, leaned back in his chair. "Penthouse guests don't show up in sneakers," he said. "Looks more like a day pass to the YMCA." A few guests chuckled nervously, unsure whether to laugh or recoil. And there it was, the escalation. Not policy, not protocol, pure mockery. He breathed in once, slow, steady, the same way he had breathed when his first real estate deal nearly collapsed, when bankers told him no, when rooms like this treated him like less. One breath, a lifetime compressed into it. "Check my reservation," he said finally. The words weren't loud. They didn't need to be. The manager scoffed. "We don't take commands from trespassers." She nodded at the officers. "Escort him out. Now." The taller officer adjusted his stance. "Ma'am, we'll need verification first." But she cut him off. "Verification? You want to waste time with that? He's not who he says he island. Look at him." That phrase, "look at him," hung heavier than the chandeliers above. It wasn't about paperwork anymore. It was about appearance, about assumption, the kind that couldn't be erased by IDs or black cards or titles. Guests felt it too. A middle-aged man whispered, "That's not right." A college student near the lobby bar whispered louder, "This feels off. I'm filming." His phone rose high, lens blinking red. The manager saw it, snapped, "Turn that off. Hotel policy forbids unauthorized recording." But it was too late. The red light had already caught her smirk, her disdain, the officers closing in. And through it all, the man in the leather jacket didn't flinch. Because every insult, every sneer, every chuckle was adding weight to her side of the scale. And when the truth landed, when his name finally fell like a hammer, it would crush her with the very evidence she had created. He didn't resist the officers. He didn't argue with the crowd. He simply stood, patient as stone, letting their words carve the case against themselves. The trap wasn't his to set. It was theirs. The grip tightened. The crowd buzzed, and yet he didn't move. Not a twitch, not a flinch, just stillness. Silence can be mistaken for weakness. That's what the manager thought. That's what the officers assumed. But silence is also strategy, and right now, his silence was the loudest thing in the room. He let the insults pass over him like weather. Fraud. Trespasser. Not our kind. Words fired like bullets, but none of them hit. He stood as if shielded by something larger than marble, or glass shielded by the certainty of truth. The taller officer tugged once more at his arm. "Sir, let's make this easy." He met the man's eyes, steady. It already island. The officer blinked, unsettled by the calm. He expected shouting, resistance, a struggle he could write into a report. Instead, he found stillness so firm it felt immovable. The manager scoffed from across the lobby. "Don't stare. Move him." But even the officers hesitated. The man wasn't resisting, but he wasn't complying either. He was rooted, like the marble under his shoes had fused to his bones. The silence thickened. Guests shuffled uncomfortably. A cough echoed. A glass clinked against the bar. The chandeliers hummed as if amplifying the quiet. And then, finally, he spoke. Soft, low, measured. "Run my name." 3 words. Nothing more. The manager laughed, sharp and cruel. "You think that will save you? We know your type." Her words cracked the air, but his calm didn't break. He turned slightly toward the crowd, not the desk. His voice carried just enough to be heard. Truth doesn't need volume. It was not defiance. It was declaration. A murmur rippled through the onlookers. Some nodded, some frowned, unsure. A woman near the entrance whispered, "He hasn't raised his voice once." A man replied, "That's what makes it scary for them." The junior clerk, still clutching her phone, finally dared a step forward. "I saw it," she said, her voice trembling but clear. His name was there, Carter, penthouse. The manager's head snapped around, eyes blazing. "Quiet, or you'll be out of a job." "Oh." But the girl didn't back away. Not yet. Not this time. He didn't thank her. He didn't even look her way. His gaze stayed forward, steady, as if her courage wasn't for him but for herself. Because it was. His silence wasn't empty, it was space. Space for others to decide whether they'd fill it with truth or fear. And in that silence, the room began to fracture. Guests shifting from passive observers to uneasy jurors. Employees cracking under the pressure of lies. Officers caught between orders and instinct, all while he remained motionless. Years earlier, he had learned this discipline. At 25, when a banker called him too risky for a loan despite triple collateral. At 29, when an investor laughed at his business plan, saying, "You don't look like leadership." Each time he learned, never let the room control your voice. Make them reveal themselves first. Now, decades later, he stood in his own lobby, practicing the same lesson. The manager mistook it for submission. The crowd began to sense it was something else. And he knew when the storm finally broke, it wouldn't be his silence on trial. It would be theirs. It started small, a red light, barely visible in the corner. The young clerk had hesitated long enough. Her phone was up now, trembling in her hand. Camera pointed squarely at the scene. The blinking dot painted the moment in quiet urgency. Across the lobby, a college student by the bar whispered, "Film this. People need to see it." He lifted his phone too, steadier, bolder. His friend muttered, "Careful, they'll throw you out." But the recording didn't stop, the manager noticed. She stormed a step forward, her heels snapping like gunfire against the marble. "Turn that off! Now! Unauthorized recording violates hotel policy." The student didn't budge. "Policy's not the problem," he said, voice louder than he meant it to be. A few heads turned. His phone stayed up. That broke the silence. Guests who had been frozen in passive discomfort began whispering louder. "He hasn't done anything. Why are they treating him like this?" All he asked was for them to check his name. The tension multiplied. The taller officer shifted uncomfortably. He wasn't paid to navigate morality plays, he was paid to enforce order. But order didn't feel clear anymore. He glanced at the manager, then at the growing sea of raised phones. His jaw tightened. The man at the center, still silent, still calm, finally turned his head toward the clerk. His voice, low and precise, cut through the lobby like steel. "Put it down." She blinked. "But, not yet." It wasn't a request. It was direction. The student frowned. "Why stop her? This is evidence." The man shook his head, his voice steady. "Truth doesn't need an audience. It needs ears in the room." The words landed heavy. A pause stretched, filled with unease and reflection. Some lowered their phones, ashamed they'd been ready to trade dignity for clicks. Others held their cameras tighter, unwilling to let go of the only weapon they felt they had. From the far side of the room, an older guest, silver hair, tailored suit cleared his throat. "She's right," he said, gesturing to the clerk. "His name was in the system. I saw it when I checked in." Gasps followed. The manager's face drained of color, then flushed crimson. "That's impossible," she snapped. "Our systems don't make mistakes." But the crowd had already shifted. It was no longer a one-sided performance. It was a courtroom with witnesses stepping forward, verdicts forming in whispers. The man remained unmoved. His calm gave the others permission to fill the silence. The clerk spoke again, this time louder. "I saw Carter, penthouse, VIP tag." The manager's hand slammed against the desk. "Enough." Her voice cracked like a whip. "Security, remove her too." The officers didn't move. "Not yet." The young student by the bar muttered, "She's digging her own grave." He wasn't wrong. The man in the leather jacket lowered his gaze briefly, almost like a bow. It wasn't defeat, it was patience. Because every witness who spoke, every phone that rose, every whisper that shifted sides, all of it was weight stacking against her. And when the scale finally tipped, it wouldn't be him who fell. The lobby was no longer hushed. It buzzed half outrage, half disbelief. And the manager, sensing her control slipping, doubled down. She stepped closer, her voice sharper now, pitched high enough to drown out the whispers. "He doesn't belong here. Look at him. Sneakers, a leather jacket, no luggage. Do you really believe someone like this has a penthouse suite?" The words cut through the air, slicing dignity into pieces. Gasps and murmurs followed. From the side of the desk, another employee entered the fray. Mid-30s, blazer crisp, voice oiled with arrogance. He folded his arms and eyed the man as if inspecting counterfeit currency. "We see this all the time," he announced to the crowd. "People walk in, claim a reservation, wave around a fake card, and hope we're too busy to notice. It's a scam, classic." The manager smiled, emboldened. "Exactly. And this one almost fooled you all." The clerk with the phone trembled but didn't back away. "His name was there. Quiet." The new employee barked, his tone like a slammed door. "Don't embarrass yourself. You're new. You don't know the system." The young woman's lips pressed tight, but her eyes darted back to the man in the leather jacket. He hadn't moved, hadn't spoken. He let the storm swirl around him. Then, from the corner, another voice joined smooth, mocking. A guest in a tailored gray suit, drink in hand, smirk plastered across his face. "She's right, penthouse guests don't come dressed like that." He raised his glass in mock salute. "Maybe the budget motel down the street is more your speed." A ripple of cruel laughter broke out from a handful of onlookers who preferred spectacle to justice. Phones captured it all. The manager gestured toward the officers again. "Enough of this circus. Escort him out now. He's wasting everyone's time." The taller officer hesitated. "Ma'am, with this many witnesses, maybe we should—" "Do it," she snapped, voice cracking with desperation. "Or I'll be filing a complaint about your performance too." The shorter officer shifted uneasily but tightened his grip. The tension spiked. Guests drew closer, some outraged, some entertained, all caught in the gravity of the moment. The man in the leather jacket finally raised his head. His eyes locked on the mocking guest with the drink, then drifted calmly back to the manager. His lips parted, voice low but razor sharp. "Every word you say writes your own report." It wasn't loud, but it silenced the room. The manager's face flushed. "Threats won't work here." He didn't answer. He didn't need to. Because the truth was already stacking higher, heavier, undeniable. The more they spoke, the more the crowd shifted. The line between policy and prejudice had been crossed, and everyone could feel it. And yet, the storm wasn't done. The mocking guest leaned in closer, his smirk widening. If he really had money, he'd prove it. Right now. Open your account. Show us. Or admit you're a fraud. The manager clapped her hands once, as if sealing the demand. "Yes, show us. Right here, in front of everyone." The officers waited. The crowd held its breath. But the man remained still, grounded, as if rooted in something deeper than marble. Because silence wasn't retreat, it was patience. And patience was about to become power. The air cracked. The mocking guest's demand hung heavy, echoed by the manager's smirk. And then the line broke. The new employee, the one in the blazer, strode forward, snatched the slim black card from the counter where it still lay, and held it up like evidence of a crime. "Fake," he announced. "You can buy these online for $50. Gasps rippled across the lobby. Someone near the bar muttered, "That's theft." Another whispered, "He didn't even check it." The clerk flinched. "You can't just—" But before she could finish, the manager cut her off with venom. "Seal it. Lock it up." "Oh." The blazer man slipped the card into a drawer, snapping it shut with a clatter that rang louder than any gavel. And then it escalated. The taller officer stepped forward, voice firm. "Sir, you're being detained for investigation. Hand over your bag and device." He reached for the phone in the man's hand. For the first time, the man's posture shifted, not a flinch, not resistance, but precision. His hand closed over the phone, his voice low and sharp. "Touch me again, and this hotel will answer for it in court." The officer froze, thrown by the calm ferocity in his tone. But the manager pressed harder, sensing her authority slipping. "Do it," she hissed. "He's not a guest, he's a thief. Secure his belongings before he runs." The shorter officer grabbed the man's small leather bag from the adjacent chair and dropped it onto the marble floor with a thud. Gasps broke out again. A child's voice whispered to his mother, "Why are they treating him like that?" The mother pulled her son closer, shaking her head. "Because they think he can't fight back." The man in the leather jacket remained still, gaze unbroken, silence heavier than their accusations. His eyes traveled slowly across the room to the clerk trembling near the desk, to the businessman frowning in disapproval, to the phones raised higher now, capturing everything. The manager lifted her chin. "Escort him outside. Let the police sort him out." The taller officer moved in, hand brushing against his arm again, firm, almost shoving. "Time to go." But he didn't move. He didn't resist. He simply let the force land against his stillness, as if rooted deeper than marble could reach. And that stillness made the crowd shift. "This is wrong," someone said aloud now, not a whisper. A ripple of agreement followed. The mocking guest rolled his eyes. "Please. You all know what this island. Just another wannabe trying to play rich. Don't get sentimental." But the crowd didn't laugh this time. Phones steadied. Eyes hardened. And in that fragile balance, one truth emerged. The humiliation had peaked. The theft of dignity, the public stripping of belonging, the card locked away, the bag tossed to the ground. It was the kind of moment that carves scars. The manager smirked, savoring it like a victory. She had no idea she was standing on the edge of her own collapse. Because in humiliating him, she hadn't just written a report, she'd written her own sentence. And the lobby was about to read it aloud. The drawer clicked shut. His bag sat on the marble floor, kicked aside like trash. The humiliation was complete. For everyone else, that might have been the end. For him, it was only the beginning. He exhaled once, a slow, measured breath. Then, with the same calm that had carried him through every insult, every shove, every dismissal, he lifted his phone, not high, not for the cameras, just enough to speak into it. "Activate protocol." His voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the lobby like a commandment. On the other end, a woman's voice answered instantly, crisp, efficient. "Protocol engaged, timestamp logged, incident documentation active." The manager frowned, confused. "What? Who are you calling?" He didn't look at her. "Keep logging," he said into the phone. "Yes, sir. All visual feeds synced. Evidence chain confirmed," the voice replied. The taller officer stiffened. "What's going on here?" The manager barked, "It's a bluff. Don't listen, he's stalling." But unease spread. Guests exchanged glances. The clerk's trembling stopped, replaced with something new: recognition. The man in the leather jacket lowered the phone slightly, his gaze sweeping the room. "Every word you've spoken since I entered this lobby," he said, voice low but precise, "has been recorded. Every insult, every accusation, every attempt to erase me." Murmurs rippled across the crowd. Phones tilted higher. The older guest in the tailored suit whispered, "He's documenting everything." The manager's smirk faltered, but she forced it back. You think calling some assistant will save you? This isn't your playground. This is Horizon Grand. At that, the faintest flicker of a smile touched his lips. The kind of smile that isn't joy but certainty. Yes, he said softly. It Island? The manager blinked. What? He didn't answer. Not yet. Instead, he glanced at the officers. You've been ordered to remove me without verification. I advise you wait. The taller officer shifted, uneasy. Ma'am? He asked the manager. You want us to? Yes, she snapped, voice rising. Now, before he causes more chaos. But chaos was already unraveling, just not the way she thought. Because while her voice cracked with desperation, his calm grew heavier, louder without volume. And the crowd began to feel it. The clerk spoke again, firmer this time. He's not lying. His name is in the system. I saw it. The manager whirled on her. You're done here. But the clerk didn't back down. Not this time. Then fire me. But I won't stay quiet. Gasps scattered through the room. The power dynamic shifted, subtle but seismic. The man in the leather jacket raised the phone again. Mark that statement, he instructed. Logged. His assistant confirmed. The manager's face reddened, her control slipping through clenched fists. She jabbed a finger toward him. This isn't a courtroom. You don't get to document your lies here. But he finally turned, his gaze locking on hers. No, he said, steady as stone. This isn't a courtroom. It's evidence. And the weight of the word hung in the lobby like a verdict waiting to fall. The word evidence hung in the air like smoke no one could clear. Phones stayed raised, breaths held. The marble lobby turned into a stage where truth was about to step out of the shadows. The manager's laugh cracked, brittle, desperate. Enough. You're nothing but a liar with a phone. This act ends now. He turned the device slightly, as if signaling his assistant on the other end. Begin internal verification. Flag ownership records. A pause. Then the crisp reply. Confirmed. Ownership files queued. Ready for broadcast. The crowd shifted. Guests leaned closer. The officers glanced at each other, their grip loosening, unease spreading like a virus. The manager tried again, louder. Don't believe him, he's bluffing, people like him always. But she didn't finish, because his voice cut clean through her words. I'm not your guest. The room froze. I'm not a trespasser. Phones zoomed in, catching every syllable. I am the owner of this hotel. The words didn't shout. They didn't need to. They landed heavy, undeniable, rearranging the entire atmosphere. Gasps erupted. The young clerk clapped a hand over her mouth. The older guest whispered, I knew it. The student by the bar muttered, Oh my God, it's his. The officer's grips fell away instantly as if burned. The shorter one stumbled back a step. The taller one cleared his throat, voice suddenly uncertain. Sir, is this true? He didn't look at them. His eyes stayed locked on the manager. Run my name, he repeated low, steady. The clerk, voice shaking but resolute, darted to the terminal. Her fingers flew over the keys. Seconds later, the monitor chimed. She looked up, wide-eyed. It's there, she whispered. Then louder for the whole lobby. Reservation penthouse. VIP level. Owner clearance. The lobby erupted. Gasps, whispers, shouts. Guests turned to one another, to their phones, to the cameras that were already streaming. The manager staggered back, color draining from her face. That's impossible. But the clerk didn't flinch. It's real. He belongs here more than anyone. The mocking guest with the drink tried to laugh it off. Owner? Please. If he was the owner, why? The man in the leather jacket cut him off without raising his voice. You called me a fraud in a hotel I own. It was a blade. Clean. Precise. Final. The mocking guest's smirk collapsed. He lowered his glass, suddenly small. The manager tried one last grasp at control. Even if he is, this behavior is unacceptable. But the crowd had turned. Phones were pointed at her now. Guests muttered openly. We saw everything. She humiliated him. This is going viral. And he simply stood, silence returning like a crown placed back on his head. Because in that moment, he didn't need to fight. He only needed to exist in the truth he had carried all along. And the truth had just broken the lobby in half. The revelation detonated like thunder under glass. For a heartbeat, the lobby was silent, stunned, suspended. Then the collapse began. The manager's smirk dissolved first, melting into a blank mask. Her lips moved, but no words came out. She staggered a step backward, as if distance could erase the confession she'd just mocked. The officer who had gripped his arm so tightly moments earlier released him completely, hands retreating to his belt. His voice wavered. "Sir, I didn't know." The shorter officer dropped his gaze, shame flashing across his face. He muttered something inaudible, shifting uncomfortably as if wishing the marble floor would swallow him. At the desk, the blazer-clad employee who had locked the black card into the drawer fumbled for words. His arrogance drained, leaving only sweat at his temples. I was just following procedure." His eyes darted to the manager, desperate for cover that no longer existed. The mocking guest with the drink tried to chuckle, weak and hollow. It's just a misunderstanding, right?" But the tremor in his voice betrayed him. His glass rattled as he set it down, suddenly aware of how ridiculous he looked. And then, the sound that shifted everything. Applause. It started with the older guest in the tailored suit, a slow, deliberate clap that echoed against the marble. Then the student by the bar joined, his phone still live. Then a woman near the elevators, then another by the entrance. Within seconds, the lobby was filled with clapping, sharp, loud, undeniable. Phones recorded every angle, the pale manager, the trembling staff, the officers frozen mid-shame, the crowd erupting in vindication. The young clerk who had first spoken stepped closer, her chin high now. She didn't tremble anymore. Her voice was steady, proud. "I told you, his name was there. You wouldn't listen." The manager spun toward her, fury clashing with fear. But the crowd's eyes pinned her in place, leaving no escape. She lowered her hand, jaw clenched, eyes glassy with panic. The man in the leather jacket didn't move. He didn't smile. He didn't bask in the applause. He simply stood in the center of the storm, calm as ever, letting the chaos spiral around him. Because this wasn't victory yet. This was exposure. And exposure was only the beginning. Guests muttered to their cameras. "I can't believe we saw that live." She tried to throw out the owner. "This is going everywhere." The student by the bar, narrating into his live stream, said, "We're at the Horizon Grand, and the man they tried to humiliate just revealed he owns this place. You're watching history happen." His view count ticked upward in real time. The officers, now completely detached from the manager, shifted uncomfortably by the door. Neither dared touch him again. One finally spoke, voice hushed. "What do you want us to do, sir?" He didn't answer. Not yet. Instead, his eyes returned to the manager, white-knuckled, breath shallow, power evaporated. And he let the silence hang, heavy, suffocating, making her squirm under the weight of her own downfall. Because the next move wasn't about humiliation. It was about justice. And justice was about to arrive. The clapping subsided, replaced by a silence sharper than applause. All eyes waited on him, on the decision they sensed was coming. He lifted the phone again. His voice, still calm, carried the weight of finality. "Carla." On the other end, his assistant's reply was instant. "Standing by." The manager flinched at the name, as if she recognized it. The blazer employee swallowed hard. The officers stiffened. "Terminate access for Gregory Vance, front office manager," he said, his gaze fixed on the woman trembling behind the desk. "Effective immediately. Lock him out of Horizon Systems. Document this incident for audit." The manager's knees nearly buckled. "Wait," she stammered, reaching out as if words could pull her authority back. "Processing," Carla replied. A second later, the monitor behind the desk flashed red. A tone buzzed. The manager's badge, clipped neatly to her blazer, blinked once, then died. Gasps erupted. Guests leaned forward, hungry eyes devouring the moment. The blazer employee shook his head violently. "Sir, I was following her orders. I didn't mean—" He cut him off without raising his voice. "Kevin Patel, terminate. Same order." "No!" Kevin's voice cracked, panic spilling across his face. But it was too late. Another red flash on the system. His badge went dark. The younger officer exhaled slowly, like a man realizing the tide had turned far beyond his control. The crowd shifted again. Whispers turned into open declarations. Justice. Finally, he's cleaning house. Oh. The mocking guest with the drink tried to slink backward, but phones followed him like hounds. He muttered, "I didn't mean anything by it." The man in the leather jacket didn't even glance his way. He wasn't worth the breath. Instead, he returned his focus to the trembling staff. Every insult you spoke, every policy you twisted, logged, archived, irreversible. Carla's voice came back, crisp and unflinching. Both terminated, credentials revoked, incident stored for legal. The manager gasped, her voice breaking. Please, you don't understand. But he cut her off with a single line, cold as steel. I understand perfectly. I built this place to be sanctuary. You made it a weapon. The words struck harder than any badge lockout. The older guest began clapping again, louder this time. The crowd followed, filling the lobby with thunderous applause. Some cheered, others simply stood, awe etched across their faces. The officers stepped back fully now, their posture shifting from authority to apology. One finally spoke. Sir, our orders came from her. We didn't know. He met their eyes, steady. Then learn. Justice doesn't come from volume. It comes from truth. Neither officer argued. Both lowered their gaze, chastened. And with that, the man in the leather jacket bent down, lifted his small leather bag from the marble floor, and slung it back over his shoulder. He didn't rush. He didn't gloat. He simply stood tall, ownership and dignity restored, while the lobby roared around him. But he wasn't finished. Not yet. Because justice had to end with a message. And that message was coming next. The applause thundered, then ebbed into reverent silence. Every phone stayed raised, every eye locked on him. The marble lobby that had been a courtroom, then a stage, now felt like a pulpit. He adjusted the strap of his leather bag, gaze steady, voice low but amplified by the quiet. You thought humiliation would erase me. You thought silence meant submission. But silence, he paused, letting the words sink in, is what comes before power speaks. The line dropped like stone into water ripples, racing across every face, every phone recording, every heartbeat in the room. The manager badge dead, reputation shattered, stared at the floor, unable to meet his eyes. Kevin hovered uselessly beside her, pale and sweating. The officers stood rooted in shame. He didn't address them again. They were finished. Instead, he turned toward the clerk, the one who had dared to whisper first, to record, to step forward when no one else would. Thank you, he said simply. Courage starts small, but it carries weight. Her eyes widened, but she nodded, a tear slipping free. Then he faced the lobby as a whole, the crowd that had watched the spectacle unfold, some silent, some complicit, some brave. His voice sharpened, every syllable measured. Justice doesn't need shouting, it doesn't need permission, it only needs truth and the courage to stand in it. A beat. A silence so profound it felt holy. Then, his final words, I don't need a camera to prove who I am. I am the result after it stops recording. The lobby erupted, cheers shaking the chandeliers above. Phones captured the moment, but it didn't matter because the truth was already immortal. And with calm, deliberate steps, the black CEO walked through the lobby he owned. No guards, no applause chasing him, just dignity, heavier and louder than anything marble or glass could hold. The story was finished, but the echo would remain.